Welcome to session 3 of Cognero training. Today we will be talking about learning objectives. We will begin with an introduction, following up with an overview of metadata, so we have a little bit better understanding of what that means. We will dive into learning objectives, discussing objective IDs, changing and adding objective IDs, and chapter numbers. Authors and learning objectives will conclude this training, followed by some resources. The purpose of this training, there's been some confusion behind learning objectives, specifically when it comes to naming and when making changes. We want to make sure that you guys have the most up-to-date and correct information so as to not create any extra work or trouble on your future projects. The objectives are to understand the purpose of learning objectives, know how to handle changes to learning objectives, and using the proper form of naming conventions. So an introduction into learning objectives. The learning objectives, which we also refer to as LOs, will tie test questions to specific instructional goals. The LOs can be used to sort questions, build tests, and build reports. These LOs can be used as criteria in order to build the tests. You can search for specific learning objectives and build a test directly just based on that learning objective. You add an LO the same way you would add data to any field that allows separate records. And the main difference is that LOs have two parts. There's an objective ID and a description. As you can see in the diagram to the right, we will talk about this a little bit later. You can see that there is a Cognero database and two question sets. Both question set 1 and 2 in their questions link to the same learning objective. And as I said, we will refer back to that a little bit later. So an introduction into metadata. While none of the following metadata fields are required in Cognero, there's basic requirements for each field that you and your team must decide to populate. Let's see, rationale. The rationale is the thinking behind the question and provides more detailed information about how to arrive at the answer. The difficulty can be chosen between simple, moderate, and complex. The reference. Any of the following are acceptable. Unit 5, Chapter 2, Section 1 and 2, page 19, relevant A-head, which would match exactly what's in the book. Then we have the learning objectives, the ID and the objective. The ID, you want to use the following naming convention, which we will again get into deeper. It includes title, author, copyright year, and the number. The objective is going to be the actual objective or numbering system that links to the objective. Standards, broken down into ID and standards. There are 5 different standard fields in Cognero: accrediting, national, state, local, and corporate. These work the same way as learning objectives, where the ID must be unique. Generic naming conventions. For this, you're going to work with your product team if you have a discipline-specific naming convention that you need to use in these fields. Search keywords. You're going to place your Bloom's taxonomy metadata in this field. Topic. Use this for broader concepts that might span chapters or units. For example, in a comparative government textbook, you might have topics such as monarchies, democracies, parliamentary governments. In a literary survey textbook, the topics may include short stories, poetry, literary devices, and figurative language. Notes and other. Remember that information in notes and other fields cannot be used by instructors to sort and create tests. These are basically blank miscellaneous sections that you can put information as needed. However, just remember that instructors will not be able to populate a test and pull questions together using these fields. So let's talk about objective IDs. The most important thing is the objective ID must be unique. Therefore, you cannot use the same objective ID for LOs in different products. For example, if you have an objective ID of 1-1 for an economic product, you cannot have an objective ID of 1-1 for an English product. If that were the case, the objective ID for the English product would be the exact same as the economic. They would be linked together. The standard format for the objective ID in higher ed is going to be the title, followed by a period, the first 4 of the author, period, copyright year, period, and then the number. The number is going to be whatever learning objective numbering system your team establishes. Again, that's unique. You want to make sure you're following whatever your team does. Each team is going to have something different, and you don't want to have something that's completely opposite of what your coworkers are using. And as you can see in the diagram, we have a red box around the section where that would be. You can see that there is an objective ID section for the number along with a description. Changing and adding objective IDs. This has been a common problem that's been happening. We want to make sure that we nip this in the bud and that you guys have the right information as to how to change this. All existing metadata in ExamView was imported to Cognero, so you may see existing objective IDs and descriptions in your 2016 questions. Please note the following. Multiple questions may share the same objective ID. So if you edit the description field for one question, it will apply that new description to all questions with that objective ID. For example, as I said before, if you had an objective ID that was 1-1, when you go ahead and change that, any other question that's using 1-1, the objective description is now going to change. They will all be changed. If you simply delete the existing objective ID and type a new one, it will only change the learning objective for that question and register a brand new learning objective. So if the case is you have a learning objective linked to many different question sets, and you want to change that because there's incorrect information, maybe there's a typo, or maybe the information has changed, and you go ahead and change that, it will affect all of them. If it's just that one question, and you change that one learning objective, you want to delete it and create a new one. Some changes to learning objective metadata can be made in bulk via a backfill in Cognero. If you need to make any of these, if you need to make the same change to the learning objective, the objective ID or the description field for multiple questions, or you have a batch of new learning objectives you need available in Cognero, you want to email us at 3pi@cengage.com. That's something that we can help you with backshot when we work with Cognero. It could be really timely if you had to go through and change individual ones altogether. Chapter numbers in the objective ID. Adding a chapter number in the learning objectives may work well for your product, but it also may create difficulties. I'll give you an example. In an English textbook, you have the following objective. The student will recognize common poetic forms. Chapter 1 deals with Renaissance and Shakespearean plays and sonnets, while Chapter 20 deals with modernist writers and free verse. The same objective is going to apply to questions in both chapters, so you wouldn't want to include chapter number in the objective ID. The objective ID that can be used across chapters might look something like this. We have the example where it says World Lit. The first 4 of the author, the copyright year 2015, and then the numbering system afterwards, and it would be recognized common poetic forms. Alternatively, you could use another level of numbers to keep similar objectives together, or group skills that contributed to a large accomplishment. For example, if you wanted to group fiction and poetry objectives together, you could do something like we have listed below. You can see the objective ID with the we have the World Lit, we have the author, we have the copyright year, then we have the numbering system, and as you can see it's 0-1, but we have 0.00 for poetry, 0.01 for poetic forms, 0.02 for rhyme schemes, and 0.03 for the meter of a poem. Another example over here, we have for chapter 2, it would be 0.0, 0.01, 0.02. For fiction, identify the protagonist and identify the central themes. This is optional. The above example is just to inform about different organizational strategies. You may have something that works better within your discipline. Make sure you check with your team to make sure that they're all using the same form. Authors and learning objectives. 5 things to talk to your author about standards and objectives. They're made up of 2 parts. There's the ID and the description. The objective ID must be unique, as we said before. There's two different learning objectives cannot have the same ID. The standard format would be the first 4 of the title, first 4 of the author, copyright year, and number. And as you can see, we have an example for Birkin, Making America, A History of the United States, 7th edition, 2015. And it condenses down to that little equation over here to the right. The standard format for standard ID in higher education Cognero products. You want to work with your discipline power user on a naming convention, so again, everyone has the same one. Multiple questions may share the same objective, so if you edit the description field for one question, it will apply that new description to all questions with that learning objective ID. We want to make sure that we make this very clear to our authors, and I've said it probably 3 times throughout the training. It's a major important step to remember, because if we go ahead and accidentally do a change that's going to go across the board and change all of the learning objectives for that tag, it could create quite a problem. If you delete the learning objective ID and type in a new one, it's only going to change it for that question, and it will register a brand new objective. You only want to edit objectives and standards if you find a typo in them. If the wrong objective or standard is attached to a question, you should remove it and add the correct one. I'm going to repeat that. You only want to edit the objective and standards if you find a typo. For example, if there was a word spelled incorrectly and it said, instead of the, it said thy, you want to go in and change that to an E, and it will change it across the board. But if it's the wrong objective or standard and it's the wrong information, you want to remove it and add the correct one from the start. And some resources for you. We have the Learning Objective Standards. It's a reference, it's a brief document about editing and adding learning objective metadata for your Cognero test bank questions. We also have the Product Planning and Process Improvement Office Hours, which we offer weekly. Wednesdays at 2 p.m. You can come with your questions, you listen in, maybe other people are having the same problem, and you can always email us at 3pi@cengage.com. We're always monitoring that, and we want to make sure that all the emails come in get the quickest response. So if you have something that's really specific to your team or to your project, shoot us an email at 3pi@cengage.com, and then we'll be able to address it and get back to you. That concludes this training. Thank you very much.